From the Oklahoma newsroom, it's time for another Thunder Thursday. I'm Jenny Carlson here with our Thunder coverage team, just flown back from Philadelphia. Eric Horn, Thunder beat writer, columnist Barry Trammell, Thunder beat writer Brett Dawson, who, I think we should start by our Westbrook impersonations after Mr. Doublebird last night in Philly. You saw it, Eric. You want to lead us off?
I was a few yards behind him, and the guy just stood up looking like Allen Iverson with his red Iverson jersey on. He just gave him the doubles, and then Russell Westbrook was like, "This guy, what?" And then he went to the ref and he said, "Hey, that guy."
I think in the media we've all seen that look from Russell Westbrook from time to time.
Can he do that? Can he do that? One point of clarification. The knucklehead in Philly on the front row. He might have been wearing an AI jersey. He looked nothing like Allen Iverson.
No.
Whatever's the ultimate opposite of Allen Iverson, that's what this guy was.
Yeah.
Barry, do you want to make your statement against the Philadelphia jerseys while we're at it? We're talking about fans in jerseys, players.
I didn't like the Philly jerseys. Why do they call themselves Phila? P-H-I-L-A.
Nobody in Philly calls them
themselves
Phila.
I think it's like when you're a kid and you do this poster board and it's like Happy Birth. Like they just ran out of the room.
So the rest of it's on the back somewhere?
Yeah, somewhere. So it's on the inside, maybe.
It's like nobody here says Oak City. So if they did that on a jersey, it would be a nightmare. Surely people in Philly don't like this.
Just to clarify things, I thoroughly enjoyed my time in Philadelphia last night.
Looked like they had a good crowd.
The crowd was fantastic. It was a collegiate atmosphere. Aside from our one knucklehead, as we said, it was a great crowd, one of the best crowds I've ever seen in an NBA game. It was playoff-esque.
You know what's great about this conversation, guys? We're talking about actual basketball.
Really?
It is back.
Finally.
Real basketball.
Preseason's over. Practice is over. It's time for the actual games that count, and one has counted in the Thunder's favor, a 103-97 nail-biter against the Sixers. Eric, let's start with you. First impressions from this team. This was one game against the team that was the worst in the league a year ago. It was a close game. What were your first impressions about the Thunder?
Well, them having the ability to get defensive stops down the stretch regardless of who it's against. Joel Embiid had his first game in the NBA last night. This is a guy who was drafted 2 years ago, a monumental talent. He's going to be a superstar in the league. And he had his moments. You know, he had 20 points. He was on a minutes restriction. They actually exceeded that minutes restriction, and he went to about 22 minutes. And he had an opportunity to really get some offense going for Philly late, and I think the Thunder held them to about 6 points in the last 4 minutes. I mean, it was significant, especially considering they had Enes Kanter on the floor for those last 4 minutes or so with Steven Adams.
Yeah.
And we all know Enes Kanter has his problems with defense.
Right. Barry, I mean, a 6-point win is still a win in the NBA, always important. But, I mean, we knew that this was not going to be a team that was going to be winning by 15, 20, 25 points. But still, is there any concern after such a close call in Philly?
Well, there's not. I don't think there's a concern for the close call. This team, you're right. If you remember what you've seen for the last 8 years, take it out to the lake and dump it in the lake. 'Cause it's not like that anymore. There's no Kevin Durant around to work his magic with Westbrook. But you go on the road and win, that's a good win. I mean, Boston monkeyed around at home with Brooklyn. We saw several teams lose at home. Just winning on the road was a good first step. Several things I saw that I liked. Ilyasova, I think, is a player. I didn't know for sure. I know it now. The guy can play. I've heard nothing since he got traded. All I've heard is he takes a lot of charges. And I thought, yeah. He got 2 last night. So,
Eat your heart out, Nick Collison.
you know, you mentioned Kanter playing down the stretch on defense, and they survived with him. Mm-hmm. If that happens, let me tell you what, the Thunder's a load because he went for 17 and 12 last night. Adams was spectacular. And it appears the Thunder's got a point guard. It appears that he's major league caliber. I've never seen Russell Westbrook play a more complete and controlled game. It looked like he invented the sport last night. I mean, he never once was out of control. He never once lost his head too much. He barked at a couple of players, but it's only after I barked at him through the TV. So I just thought Westbrook was sensational.
Well, we'll talk more about Westbrook's brilliance here in a minute. We'll break that down a little further. But, Brett, what did you see watching Game 1 of 82?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's a concern, it's not a concern. You never have a concern after one game. But a continuing trend, Victor Oladipo's not shooting the ball very well, and I think that is a little bit concerning down the road. If he's not a guy you can count on to score consistently, but he's going to be what he is ultimately. I think the really good sign last night was you see Oladipo make 2 big shots in the fourth quarter. When they were down 4, he made a couple of big buckets, and then he steps in, he takes that charge on Joel Embiid. That's one of the biggest plays of the game, because if that's a block, that's a 3-point play, and suddenly you got a game again. He made really big plays. Enes Kanter was saying today that Victor Oladipo told him that in Orlando they called him Mr. Fourth Quarter, and after last night he kind of understood why. He did step up and make some plays. I think that was good to see after a guy really struggles.
Well, let's talk about Oladipo more extensively here before we get back to Westbrook's brilliance, because, like you say, some big plays down the stretch, but only 10 points for a guy that I think there's higher expectations than 10 points a game out of this guy. 4 of 16 shooting, 3 turnovers, 1 assist, some numbers obviously not sort of trending in the right way, and especially coming off the preseason. We talked about him during the preseason, guys, and we just kind of said, okay, wait, it's preseason, everything will work out here. But Eric, what do you chalk this up to? Was he just maybe pressing first real game? He felt like I got to show something, or is this something bigger that should be concerning?
I think beyond just Victor Oladipo last night, there were a lot of guys on the Thunder who missed gimmies. Russell Westbrook would have had a triple-double if it weren't for Steven Adams missing alley-oop dunks and Victor Oladipo missing a couple of shots around the rim. But I think Victor Oladipo is a guy who takes things very hard on himself. Not that any NBA player is easy on himself. I think these guys all have to be to get to that level. But Billy Donovan's talked about it time and time again. It's going to take time for Victor Oladipo to get acclimated to this team. And I asked Donovan about it last night, going back to Victor late in the game, and he said he's looking for Victor to make winning plays. And it's kind of the same thing that Donovan said about Deion Waiters last year. When Deion Waiters wasn't scoring, he was looking for Deion Waiters to contribute in other areas and go get a rebound, pass the ball, move the ball, play sound defense against the other team's shooting guard. And I think that's what Donovan's going to look for Victor Oladipo for until he can get his shooting going. I mean, 0 for 5 from 3, that's not ideal. You were expecting Victor Oladipo to come in and shoot better, but he can contribute in other ways, as we saw last night.
Yeah, and it looks like, surely the shooting comes around, Barry. This Thunder organization has seen Victor Oladipo shoot it well. He's had some of his biggest scoring games against them when he shot it fantastically. That has to be just a matter of time.
Yeah, although, I don't like his shot selection, especially early. I thought he was just jacking up shots haphazardly, and I thought he was better. Billy sat him big chunk of the second half. And when he came back, I thought he played much better. But in the first half, I did not think his shot selection was very good. On a night when everybody else was taking pretty good shots, even Singler. I didn't have a problem with Singler's threes that he took. He only made 1 of 5, but Oladipo was driving and sort of wild throwing them up and taking some quick outside shots. So that's my concern. We saw a little bit of that in the preseason. Now I see it in the opener. To me, that's the biggest concern last night was Victor Oladipo's shot selection.
Yeah, I think there's an adjustment to come from a situation like Orlando where, while there is a lot of a burden on him, it's a burden on him to go make plays for a team that's not going anywhere. Yeah. He's going to go get numbers. He's playing with a guy like Russell Westbrook, who is not just a guy who's going to control the ball. He's played with point guards who did that before. But Westbrook's going to score a lot. There's going to be a lot of scoring load on Russell. So he's got a different role. And I think there is an adjustment. And as Eric said, not only is he hard on himself, I think he's over-analytical sometimes. I think he thinks a little too much about what he's doing. That stuff comes with time. And NBA shooters don't forget how to shoot. He's not a great shooter, but he'll be more along the lines of what he's been.
I had a couple of questions today in our live chat at 11:30, our power lunch, about concerns over this guy, concerns over that guy. I said and obviously Oladipo's shooting was one of them. I said let's give these guys a week or two before we start hitting panic buttons, because some guys didn't have great opening nights. We've seen better shooting, we've seen better play out of several of these guys, but it's a new reality, and all of a sudden the games count. And I think it's worth giving them some time to sort of ease into things, because, like you said, Brett, I sort of feel like, especially these new guys, there's sort of got to be a pressure like, hey, all of a sudden I'm playing with Russell Westbrook, one of the best players in the world. I'm playing on a team that's been to the playoffs several years, and you start to get in your own head a little bit. So I think letting these guys sort of ease into it a little bit is maybe, I know it's easy to be reactionary when you're watching, oh my gosh, everything's going downhill. But I think to give them a minute to just get used to each other in real live games, I think is important for this team moving forward.
And if you're, again, as Donovan said, if you're going to be deficient in one area, you got to bring it somewhere else. And Victor Oladipo was able to do that last night in the fourth quarter.
Well, a guy that wasn't deficient in many areas at all last night, as Barry talked about, was Russell Westbrook. Nearly a triple-double, 1 assist short, a guy that a lot of people think will push for that average of triple-double. 31 points, 12 rebounds, 9 assists, and probably 3, 4, 5 that could have been assists. What did you like most out of Russell Westbrook, Eric?
Well, I kind of wrote about it in the story I had in today's Oklahoma, just the composure. I mean, the Thunder wasn't really playing particularly well. The crowd was really into the game up until that point where double birds came out, and Russell scored on that play. And I think that the Thunder would have gotten rolling regardless of whether the guy flicked them off or not. But when the guy flicked him off and Westbrook kind of just did his little point thing and they just went on about their business, him and Steven Adams started connecting on the pick and roll and just getting easy buckets. There were people behind me yelling, "Too easy, too easy." So Russell Westbrook really started getting a flow there, and I really liked the way that he controlled the game, as Barry said. And it seemed like from that point on, he really had a handle on the team and where they wanted to go. And granted, they were playing a team that had a lot of minutes restrictions in terms of Okafor being limited to 12 minutes, Embiid's 20 to 22. But Russell Westbrook had complete control of the Sixers, as he's had for the past however many times he's played this team.
I think my only unanswered question is, what did Steven Adams say to Double Birdman, which we may have to ask
He
at
said,
some
I did.
point.
I asked him last night. He said that just wasn't good taste or something along those lines.
Not cool, mate.
Yeah, he did say something like that. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he chided the guy, or he gave him a good scolding in the most proper of ways. But
in his best down under methodology. Barry, you talked glowingly a minute ago about Westbrook. What to you was most impressive about him?
I think it's probably his leadership. To me, I just saw him exude leadership all night long. I saw a couple of rebounds that Russell went up to grab, and Robertson or somebody was there with it, and he just let him have them. In the old days, he'd take them away from anybody. He didn't do that. He never let the Thunder get too ramshackle, and even when they were down early, he held his composure with Birdman. So he did it. I just thought, we've seen a new Russell Westbrook. Brett, you've only read about Westbrook and his antics over these years, but let me promise you, what you're seeing now is the new and improved Russell Westbrook. I mean, it's noticeable how he sort of just said, you know what, they rely on me to be the solo leader of this team, or the absolute leader, and he seems up to the task.
Yeah.
One of the things I was looking for when I wrote that story this week about whether Russell Westbrook could average a triple-double. It's a long shot, of course. But one of the things John Schumann, who's an analyst at NBA.com, stats analyst, one of the things he talked about with Russ was, look at the way he passes the ball. He only passes to make assists. He's not looking to move the ball in the offense. I think last night he actually did do that. At some crucial times in the fourth quarter, he was swinging the ball around the perimeter, making the right pass to get the offense started. He wasn't assist hunting. He was making winning plays. I think that was very important. And Billy Donovan talked about his leadership today. That stuff is really important to a team that does have, as we talked about, so many new guys who haven't been in these situations before, who haven't been in situations where winning matters in the way it matters here. There are differences in franchises. In some of those places, it's just not the same. There's an expectation level here that's different. And so those guys are in that situation for the first time. I think he's doing a good job of guiding those guys through it.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit more about this game, and then we'll look ahead to the home opener on Friday night. It's a 7 o'clock tip.
7.
I got my football and basketball game screwed up. Phoenix on Friday night here for the home opener. You're watching Thunder Thursday, by the way, dissecting the Thunder's season opener on Wednesday night in Philadelphia. Eric, you mentioned earlier the Cantor portion of the game late, the fact that he was in there even with defensive deficiencies. Boy, say that fast 5 times. But Billy Donovan did go to those 2 big guys, Adams, Cantor, together. We saw some in the playoffs last year. But to see those guys together, I mean, is that what we're going to see? Are they going to go big in late situations with those guys?
We're going to see more of it, and it depends on the matchup. And Billy Donovan has talked about this. I mean, you get a team like Philly who's got a lot of front court talent. The Thunder are going to be able to throw their bigs at them. You get a team like Golden State, might not work as well.
Right.
I mean, I was actually reading what Barry wrote back from the playoffs about why it worked against Golden State in the first game of the Western Conference Finals last year. And, sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's not. But what makes it work is Steven Adams' versatility to be able to defend centers, power forwards. He can step out and defend a power forward who can stretch the floor like a Joel Embiid was doing last night from the three-point range. But this is a lineup that you're going to see more from Billy Donovan. He wanted to use it more in the preseason, but Adams' ankle kind of limited that. And it was effective last night because Kanter was running the floor well. Adams had a play where he missed a dunk, and then he chased down Joel Embiid from behind and snatched the ball from him and got it away from him. I mean, these guys are super skilled and super athletic, and there's no reason to think that they can't be more successful together at the end of games. Kanter probably should have played the end of games more last year when Serge Ibaka wasn't at his best.
You know, my favorite sequence in the game involved neither of the two best players, Westbrook or Adams. Andre Robertson's block, which was huge.
Kanter put back.
Westbrook gets the ball, gets it down to Oladipo. He fumbles it or misses it, whatever, and Kanter's running the floor and gets the putback. That's a huge play, but it shows that even the non-athletic guys like Kanter can get down court and make the Thunder up-tempo game really pay off.
Yeah.
Kanter's not above the rim, but he's a guy who can really run the floor well. And you know he just gobbles up offensive rebounds, so that's his niche.
And that's part of the reason why. Doesn't give up on that play. I mean, that's a guy, he mentioned that today. Run the floor just in case. You never know if that layup's going in.
You know, guys, as we talk about that combo, those bigs, I mean, we obviously know that Steven Adams and the belief that the Thunder has in him is huge. I mean, they made moves in the offseason because of that. But I'm wondering what you guys have seen, and Brett, I'll ask this to you. Have you seen Kanter improve? I mean, I'm not saying to the level that Adams is by any stretch of the imagination. We know that that's really key to leaving those two guys in there together. But where's Kanter on levels of improvement and where he is now maybe compared to a while ago?
Well, you know, I think this has been true for a while, but he's an elite offensive post
Sure.
player. I mean, he's one of the best pure offensive low post players in the league. There's no question. Defensively is still a question, and it's still a question now. I think he's worked to make some improvements. He talked about trying to move his feet better and do some of those things defensively, but he's not great at that stuff. We saw it from the very beginning in Spain that he's going to have some issues. People are going to attack him. They're going to attack him in pick and rolls. Guys who are quicker than him are just going to give him a lot of trouble. But Adams, as Eric said, Adams is so versatile that you can do some of those things together. Now, you can't do it against everybody. The two times we've seen it so far, we saw it in preseason against Denver. We've seen it against Philly. Both those teams can go really big sometimes. Denver prefers to play that way. So you're going to see a little bit more of that. Phoenix, who they'll play this weekend, can go either way. They can go a little bigger or not. But when you've got multiple big guys out there, they can make it work. Kanter's not so bad defensively that you're just going to hemorrhage points if you've got Adams out there with him. If you're going with a different lineup and Kanter's out there by himself, you can run into some problems.
We continue to talk about these guys getting acclimated, these new guys, the six newcomers, particularly Victor Oladipo, and how it's going to take time for them to get comfortable. I'd say Enes Kanter is one of the more comfortable players on the team right now. I mean, coming off of the bench in that six-man role that he had a year to be in and play 80-some-odd games in the regular season and in the postseason, he's just really taken on that role. He's instant offense, and the defense is coming along because he's playing with a guy in Adams that he has a great rapport with, and that he said today has his back. I have his, and they just got great communication right now. And you know, Kanter's not going to be the best defender, but they can really bully teams when they get those big matchups.
And if he doesn't give up on plays, you know, if he doesn't lay down when he's out there in certain situations, he may not be the best defender, but at least he hasn't become the biggest liability, I guess, in those sorts of situations. Lastly, guys, before we wrap up Thunder Thursday today, let's talk starting lineup a minute. Domantas Sabonis gets the start last night. Billy Donovan goes with him. But he also said that starting lineup subject to change. We talked about Ersan Ilyasova. Barry did, and you know what he brought. He looked pretty solid. 10 points, 5 boards, an assist, a steal, and his 2 big charges drawn. Is that a guy that gets into that starting lineup? Is that the fluidity we may see?
Well, I'm not sure. I don't guess I know the real reason why Sabonis is starting. And it may be justified, and it may continue. However, Ilyasova clearly is going to have to play more because they got to have somebody that can make a shot, and that was the downside to last night. Is 6 of 22, is that what it was, on three-pointers, and Abrinish doesn't look like he's going to play that much. Anthony Morrow may not play at all. Cameron Payne's injured. Can somebody make a shot from beyond the arc? And the answer is Ilyasova can. And he does other things. I think he's going to have to play more.
Well, you know who can score? Russell Westbrook can score. And Victor Oladipo can score. And at times, Steven Adams can score. And in that first unit, you're pretty good relatively speaking. Your scoring isn't so bad. Who's going to score with that second unit? It's not going to be Domas Sabonis. And so I think it makes sense to me to keep Ilyasova in that group. You got to have somebody who gets you some points with that unit. He's not going to create shots. You're not really going to get that in that second unit until Campaign is back or when you're playing Oladipo with those guys. But I like the idea of Ilyasova as being maybe a primary scorer in that group.
What about other positions that might be fluid? I mean, there's no doubt who your starting point guard is, but is there a chance that starting lineup is fluid in other positions, Eric?
Well, I mean, we've heard Rudy Gay trade rumors, so.
How about guys that are currently on the roster? Any obvious moves there?
I don't think so. I mean, you'd have to go out on a limb and say if they wanted to try and get more out of Singler, maybe put him as the starting small forward. But I think that his foul rate's too high, and Andre Robertson's too good of a defender for them to make the change there. To me, it's more important who closes for him, and that's something that we saw with Kanter last night. Bringing Oladipo back on, Robertson closed excellently with that big block in the fourth quarter. So to me, the starting lineup in terms of starting Sabonis with those guys to make him comfortable, I think that's a move that's kind of. It's not as big of a deal as we make it out to be, but definitely who's closing. And if Sabonis can continue to make shots, or if he can start to make shots in this first course of the regular season, then maybe you'll see him start to close games as well, because he does have good sense defensively for a young player. Now he got his head dunked on last night by Gerald Henderson. God bless him. But it was a rough start for Domas last night. But he should come along, and if he starts to make that perimeter shot, then he'll get more opportunities late.
So is there a closing lineup that's big and a closing lineup that's small? Is that what we're going to see here? That's maybe you talk about that being maybe more important than the starters. Is that what we're looking at, is a closing lineup that features Kanter Adams and a smaller lineup with Kanter out of there?
It's interesting to see if that's something that could come about, and that's where Ilyasova might come into play, since he's a guy that can space the floor. But, I mean, until we get up against a team that can really press them in terms of the small lineup, which we probably will next week with Golden State, who's going to cause the Thunder just a myriad of problems because they have amazing players.
Right.
It's two possibilities.
Barry, what about Ilyasova? How many minutes would you like to potentially see him get after last
Well, I mean,
week?
I think he needs to be in the low 20s, I think. And, I liked his all-around game, and I liked his shot. He had the one errant shot at the side of the backboard, I think, on a corner three. But the rest of the time, he's pretty much on target. So, a guy that can shoot and do some other things is incredibly valuable to this Thunder team.
Absolutely.
What about, lastly, guys, what about these next two games? Is there a chance the Thunder gets off to a 3-0 start, which for a team that is still trying to figure some things out, obviously playing without Durant for the first time, is that a possibility, a 3-0 start for this franchise?
Is it going on a limb to say it's a probability to a 3-0
maybe,
start? Two more home games, 2 home games now against Phoenix and the Lakers. The Lakers looked surprisingly good. Houston's defense looked unsurprisingly bad, so I don't want to read too much into that Lakers win. But I think it's a pretty good chance you go 2-0 at home.
Is it probable, Barry, they start 3-0?
What do we want? Let's just demand it. Let's just say it's not only probable, it's required. They got to be 3-0.
On the way to 82-0, Eric.
They got to have all these games against the Rum-Dums before it gets into that second half of the season where you're going to be on the road in January for so much. So this early home slate is critical. They got to really put in some good performances and get some wins if they want to be in solid playoff position in the second half. Not
only against the Philadelphias of the world, but when you get at home against teams you should beat, probably better beat them now. All right, guys, that's it for Thunder Thursday. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoma.